the concept of skylights is still centered around, oh, they leak, oh, they're just a warranty nightmare.
Talk to any roofer, contractor, builder, they'll say, yeah, I love what they do, but there's the risk-reward ratio, right? And we had to get that back to where the risk wasn't there and the reward was all that you were capitalizing on. We actually did something that you're not supposed to do in the world of marketing, and we branded our third generation the No Leak Skylight.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Modern Craftsman podcast. Today's guest is someone who works for Velux, but this conversation isn't just going to be about skylights. It's a conversation about journey, the messy, winding, and often beautiful process of figuring out who you are and how you want to show up in this world. Wayne Feltman is one of the guys who's done a lot, seen a lot, and isn't afraid to talk about it. He's been with Velux for 25 years, and we're really grateful to have him on today. This podcast is brought to you by Andersen Windows. What's one product that you think has a ton of hidden value in this industry? One that some in the industry might not be considered, but maybe they should. How about the Andersen 100 series product line? I know that's not a specific product, but all the products in this composite product line can help you save time, money, and even reputation.
This is because Andersen 100 series products are available at a comparable price to vinyl, while being significantly stronger and with dark colors that have a smooth, sharp-looking finish and can hold up to the heat. Whether it's entry-level homes or luxury builds, more and more builders trust 100 series products because of how good they look and how well they perform without breaking the bank. All this makes Andersen 100 series windows and doors the smart alternative to vinyl and the ultimate value for composite windows and doors. For more information, head over to andersenwindows.com/moderncraftsman.
This podcast is also brought to you by Buildertrend. You're pricing your jobs right, but for some reason your margins just keep shrinking. Where's the money going? With Buildertrend's job costing tools, you can track every expense in real time so you know exactly where your dollars are being spent. You'll uncover hidden costs, stay on top of your budget, and most importantly, you'll know how to stop the bleed. Plus, they've recently released some exciting updates to the job costing budget feature to make it even easier to track your margins.
Want to take control of your cost and protect your profits? Schedule a demo today at buildertrend.com/mcdemo.
And of course, this podcast is also brought to you by Velux. When you install Velux skylights in your build, you won't only be adding natural light and fresh air into any space, you'll be installing a globally trusted brand in your client's home. Skylights take any project from looking good to looking great, but Velux skylights make you look great too.
Visit veluxusa.com/remodeler to learn more about the products that will make word get out about your next build.
Guys, this podcast is also brought to you by Harnish Workwear. Our t-shirts are all on the H label Harnish stuff. That's been our go-to for any t-shirt for all of our brands. But we're excited to partner with them and get you early access to the Creator One soft shell work pant. Head over to harnishworkwear.com and then click the Modern Craftsman up top. You'll get an exclusive Modern Craftsman promo code for a huge discount on this product and get you on the pre-sale list.
Questionnaire was very detailed. It was nice. I feel like I know you already.
I hope it wasn't too much. I just thought like I said, I've listened to a handful of your podcasts, and I got a sense for the way you guys like to go through these, and I wanted to give you a pretty good snapshot of who I was, and I think based on the interviews I've seen you do in the past, you get into as much the psychology of business and the person as you do, what we do for a living.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I think more the better. And to be honest, I think that a lot of times the conversation goes better when it's unique perspective based on it's your upbringing, your past, your life experience. So I appreciate all the detail that you put into it. And I took the time to read through all of it, and I was very fascinated, very interested, excited to talk more. But we obviously have read your story some, but I want to start on a more personal level. You discussed your childhood and building forts and riding around and mowing lawns with your brothers. What did you think success would look like when you grew up as that young kid?
That's interesting. I don't think as a young kid you necessarily have a set idea of what success is. I grew up, like I said, in a family where both sides were entrepreneurial, had done a number of different things, and they weren't successful in what they did. So, it was really more about, what does my success look like going forward? What is my path going to be? And, as a kid, I'm like a lot of kids. I thought about a lot of different things, everything from, I wanted to be a pilot, like a lot of young kids do, to wanted to be a builder, an architect, which my grandfather was a builder. So that inspired me on that front. But, coming out of grade school into high school, I really didn't have a set path. And, I thought, okay, well, when I get to college, which I originally went to school to pursue architecture, I thought, okay, once I get to college, I'll kind of get this thing figured out, only to find out about a year in that, I still didn't have it figured out. And quickly changed gears and shifted my focus to business from architecture.
I think that maybe it's the way that you're brought up, but like I knew I wanted to be successful, but without having a full understanding of what I wanted to do, I found it difficult to believe that I would be successful. And I know in your story, you told us that you just didn't really understand your path, and there was a long journey, obviously, to get you to where you are today. But do you think that like you have to understand where you're bound to end up in order to be successful, or have this idea that you can be successful?
I don't. And I think, when you're younger, you kind of think that's the way the world works and the way life works. You kind of, figure out what direction you want to take in life, and you start pursuing it. And then as you start living life and start pursuing your dreams, you realize, what, they change as time goes on. Different experiences and exposures in life kind of redirect where you thought you were headed or where you want to head. And that was very much the case with me. Like I said, I guess, when I was really young growing up, I thought, okay, I'm going to be like my grandparents or my parents where, I want to own my own business and run my own shop and do my own thing. And ultimately, I tried that for a bit, and quite honestly, didn't really care for that entrepreneurial running a business 24/7 that I grew up around. And
why is that?
So. I grew up in grade school unloading semi-trailers in the evenings after school, working weekends. My dad owned a hardware store, retail hardware store, and that's, a 7-day-a-week kind of business. And I kind of grew up around that, and that just wasn't the life that I wanted. Quite honestly, I wanted my weekends. And growing up, my brothers and I started, like I said, a lawn care business, and kind of had some independence with that. We're making, at the time, for grade school into high school age kids, we were making, pretty good living, if you will, with the freedom of having our weekends to do what we wanted. And I didn't see that.
You didn't cut lawns on the weekends?
Generally speaking, no. We spent our weekends out on the lake, quite honestly.
It's funny that is what I did the exact same thing. I started like a little lawn business with my buddy, and we would push. It had to be within like a couple blocks of where you live, because we were pushing the equipment to get to the houses. And I lived in a town where like kids' parents didn't make them work. But I had so much fun doing that, and we're in 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade, and just trying to make some extra cash to be able to have some fun with. But those are some of like the best memories I have, and just simple times being outside doing that stuff.
And that's kind of how it started with us. I grew up on a cul-de-sac, and then behind us was a farm across the creek from us, if you will. So, one side of the neighborhood was a subdivision, and then the other side was kind of farmland. They had a horse farm and a bunch of acreage and woods. So it was a perfect place to grow up. But, we started we had about an acre of grass, and my dad gave us a couple 21-inch mowers and said, all right, kids are growing up, time to mow. And this was about 3rd, 4th grade. And then it just kind of snowballed from there. It went from doing only ours to doing ours and the neighbors, and then the other neighbor. And next thing you know, there were, I think, 7 or 8 homes on the cul-de-sac. We were pretty much on a routine basis doing 4 or 5 of them. A couple of them were holdouts that we couldn't close for whatever reason. And then, like I said, it just expanded from there. As we got into high school, we started mowing in my grandparents' house, and next thing you know, we're doing a bunch of homes adjacent to them. And then we called it drop a trailer. So we ultimately were working really out of about 4 neighborhoods. And we didn't grow it significantly. We had at most 20 to 25 lawns. And that was our steady business, if you will, that we knew would be there all summer long. And then my older brother worked at a landscape nursery. He went to school, got a 2-year associate's horticulture degree. And through high school, he started working at a landscape nursery. And they took on larger projects. But if somebody came in and said, yeah, I just want to buy a tree, will you come plant a tree in my backyard? That wasn't a big enough of a project for them to want to tackle. So he would sub that work out to myself and a buddy, and we would go, start doing that. And then once he had spent a few years there and I was in college, we decided to kind of go full time at it, if you will, and start our own business. And he left that company. And so it was a combination of mowing, but constructive landscape as well. So at that time he was doing design services, and myself and a buddy were doing, I'll call it the labor side of things.
Yeah. How big was your dad's hardware store?
In terms of
was it just like one store? He owned multiple stores? Was it so like? And the reason I ask, when I was I've read your story, and I feel like I can relate to being 18 to 21 years old and trying to figure out what you wanted to do, where you wanted to be, who you were supposed to be, and even earlier, like, what am I going to do with my life? And we had this really old hardware store in town that I grew up in, and it was just like super romantic, old school, like all the bins hand labeled with all the hardware. The guy in there knew everything about it. Like, they had one of everything. And I think back on that, and I always thought to myself, like, this would be such a cool place to own. And for a while I was like, I kind of want to like own this really old hardware store one day. And then I read your store, and you're like, I hated owning a hardware store. And I was like, damn, there goes that idea.
Yeah. So to answer your question, we had one main store, which was our larger store, and it was a nicer store. It wasn't the old. It was still an old school hardware store in the sense of the way we operated, but it was about a 20,000 square foot store. At the time, was a fairly large store.
Yeah.
But the way you described it, we did everything. I'll call it. We were kind of the early home center, if you will, because we had all the different departments within that store. Small engine repair and lawn and garden tools, all that, down to the hardware, the nuts and bolts and fasteners, everything you could possibly want. We had the name of the business was Service Hardware, and that was something my dad prided him in, is you pretty much bring anything to us and we'd try to service it for you, whether it had a motor on it or not.
We'll try it.
And then he grew that to a couple small towns. So that was on the north side of Indy, as the north side of Indy was growing. And then we expanded to a couple small towns, a town called Fishers, Indiana, and then up into Pendleton, Indiana, kind of a couple smaller satellite stores. But like a lot of, hardware stores, once the development passed our main store, the home centers came to town. And it became a little bit of a struggle, quite honestly.
I feel like all those small romantic shops ended up getting bought up by, Ace Hardware or True Value or one of the bigger brands. And then
there's still a couple near me, and they're still super cool. Like, I just feel like they have so much crap. There's not enough room in them for everything that they have. No. And it's like, there'll be something in a perfect package that's like 40 years old that they'd be willing to part with, that's just been sitting there for like the right person. They always have like an attic area that you can walk up that's just a bunch of miscellaneous stuff that they've collected over the years. Sounds like this is not the type of hardware store that you guys own. So I'm still going to hold out some hope that it's going to be a really cool idea, like when I retire, to own one.
Well, I think you would be impressed by some of the things that we collected that people would bring to us that had engines on them. I mean, like I said, we were a small engine repair shop as well. So, I mean, everything from snowmobiles to mini bikes to go-karts, anything with a small little, either Tecumseh, Briggs and Stratton, some of the older style engines, we could service and repair them. And sometimes the price was beyond what they wanted to spend. And next thing you know, you own those things because they don't want to haul them home.
Yeah, absolutely. It sounds, I don't know if it's like, I always thought that we're one of the last generations that had like the quintessential childhood, being outside in the elements, like robbing stuff from house builds, like you said, to build your own forts, or going in the dumpster and picking out scraps of wood. It sounds that you had a similar upbringing and a similar childhood. Do you think that that has impacted you and like your life today?
For sure. It probably is responsible for my career at this point. And I mean that sincerely. Like I said, we had a farm behind us. We didn't own it, but a lot of land, and the fringe of the development was kind of right where our subdivision was. So similar to your situation, there was a lot of new homes going up, and we went back into the woods. And when I say we built a tree fort, and we're talking, we picked the right tree about 20 feet up. I mean, we're talking about a 2-story tree fort. And when you got a hardware at your disposal and plenty of lumber around, that's where I cut my teeth, though, on, really getting my hands dirty and using tools and really learning the skills to be a craftsman.
I feel like that's the stuff they like write books about and make movies about that just doesn't happen anymore.
For sure.
That, like,
for sure.
childhood experience, coming of age. I don't know. I look back on those times with a deep fondness. I remember they built a house across the street from me once. They actually tore the house down and then built a complete new house. And I remember going over there. I was probably like 7 or 8. And 7-Eleven was big near us. And all the construction workers would buy like the hot dogs and the drinks. And they had this like stickers that you could peel off and possibly win stuff, and the guys would never peel them off, and I would go over there like every day after work and get all this free winnings from all of their cups and hot dogs. And I was like 7, and then just go to 7-Eleven. We'd like treat ourselves to a bunch of hot dogs and sodas, thanks to the construction workers across the street.
Yeah, we usually asked them if we could have some of the stuff, and most of the time they were more than generous, because they knew what we were up to, and they'd come back and see what we were up to. Ironically, our parents never really came back until we were largely built out on this thing. And then when they did see it, they were like terrified of how big it was and how high it was. I think it was when we stole one of my dad's tractor batteries and lugged it back there. I mean, literally, we had like a little low voltage system where you have, lighting throughout it. And so when I say, you learn a lot by doing these things. I mean, we learned crafts, carpentry. We learned low voltage electrical systems, if you will. You put little sockets and light bulbs and ran it off a car battery.
Yeah, that's so cool. So you discussed early on in your career, you jumped around a bunch, selling Wall Street type job to obviously the landscaping, transitioning into your Velux career. When throughout like your journey did you feel that what you were doing wasn't for you and it was time to make a change?
Yeah, no, it's an excellent question. So I graduated college in 1995, and like a lot of kids coming out of college, I was kind of chasing the almighty dollar. One of my customers that we maintained their lawn was a very successful stockbroker. So that's what got me into that business. It was more the appeal of seeing what the lifestyle, it could afford. And I was always interested in, investments and business, if you will. Part of that came out of, some of my college curriculum. But I gave that a go, and this was still back in the days of the boiler room where they put you in a cubicle and give you a call list and 200 dials a day, and before you leave, and it added up to usually about a 12-hour day. So I stuck that out for about a year. That's after spending most of my time outdoors, being in a cubicle like that was quite tough.
Were you making the money that you like anticipated?
Well, that's interesting. So, I mean, that industry at the time was, all about reaching out to your friends and family, and trying to bring as many of them into the fold as you could. I intentionally took kind of a different approach because the turnover rate in the industry, about 90% of people that start out in that industry don't stay in it. But the assets that you bring to them it's a sticky industry in that regard. So yeah. I knew that going in, and I didn't want to be the guy that brought my friends and family in only to leave it until I knew I could make it and I was going to commit to it for a long-term career. So I tried to do it the old school way, which was dial for dollars. And, it was amazing that you actually could recruit people that way and bring in assets that way. And I was pretty good on the phones to where I could get them in, but then, they show up and you got somebody that's worked a 30, 40-year career that has a rollover. And then they realize that you're a 22-year-old kid right out of college that pretty wet behind the ears. And so that was a struggle once you realize, okay, I'm not quite right. And I'll give credit to one of the older established brokers that was there. He said, Wayne, get out of this industry, go get into outside sales, build some good relationships, treat people right, and then come back into this industry, 20 years from now.
Yeah.
And that's how you become a very successful broker. So not only did I not really enjoy what I was doing, but I took that to heart. And my roommate at the time was in outside sales doing quite well. So I decided, okay, I need to maybe make a leap here and get into outside sales where I'm out and about. And that led me to the computer industry, worked for a small systems integration company for about 3 years. And when I say small, it was a local mom and pop kind of thing. And I had learned enough on the finance side of things about 401k and retirement and the importance of starting early. And one of the promises they had made to me when I started was that they would start a 401k. They were like set an upstart. And when that really didn't come to fruition, I decided to kind of look towards a bigger type company and landed at a Fortune 500 company selling time and attendance systems. But again, my heart just wasn't in it.
Yeah.
That was, like a lot of sales job, hit your monthly number to make your money, more of a commission-based job. So not a lot of stability in that regard. And so, after about 4 years of, I'll call it chasing the almighty dollar, which is basically what those jobs were, I said, and I honestly wasn't really actively looking at the time. My girlfriend at the time was looking and saw an ad for Velux. And this was back when, kind of pre-internet, most people looked at the classifieds for jobs. And she had lived through the ordeal of me replacing some skylights on my home where we both became familiar with Velux. And I was like, I know a little bit about Velux, having just replaced some skylights on my own house with Velux.
Can we talk about that? I don't want to cut you off, but I find like the issue that you were having and what you figured out was wrong with it is actually very interesting. And I kind of want to discuss that also.
For sure. Back in 95, when I graduated college, I had bought a house. And like a lot of homes in the mid 90s, it had the old plastic bubbles on it. And those things that were so discolored and clouded over, you really weren't getting much light through it. You definitely couldn't see through them. And when it would rain, it just sounded like drums. I mean, they were noisy. So I needed a new roof. So at that time, at this point, I had already had a little exposure to Velux and knew it was a quality glass skylight. So replaced the roof and replaced them with Velux skylights. And this was midsummer. Fast forward into the fall, colder winter months, we're moving in. The skylight started dripping on my pool table. Like every good bachelor, I have a pool table in my great room at the time.
You're going to piss a lot of college kids off right now, where it's like, he just got done college. He bought his own house. He's putting a new roof on it with skylights, and he has a pool table. And they're like, I'm going to go live at home because I literally can't afford anything.
Well, there's a little more backstory to that. Actually, my older brother had bought the house, and I unfortunately had lost him in an accident. So I assumed the house and his mortgage when he had passed, and it just coincided kind of when I was graduating college. But anyway, back to the skylight situation. That was when I really got intimate with the company because, even though I had grown up with skylights on our personal residence and down at my grandfather's lake house, which were Velux, with no issues at all. When it came to my own house and replaced them, I ended up having a problem. And it turns out it was improper installation. That they had not wrapped the frames with an adhesive underlayment or really any underlayment. And I've got a rough kind of beadboard ceiling that's not really that airtight, if you will. So that warm, moist air, conditioned air was making contact with the backside of the step flashing, and it would frost, and then the sun would come up, warm it up, and it would melt that frost, and it would drip down through the rough opening. And like I said, I wasn't that knowledgeable about them at the time, and had called the contractor back. He came back out and applied a bucket of bowl or tar all the way around it. Now I've got a an ugly Velux skylight, but he assured me that, the problem was solved. Well, it wasn't. It came back, and it continued. So I called him again. So he came back out, added a little bit more. And then, finally, he was convinced that it wasn't his fault, that it was a manufacturing defect of some kind, and encouraged me to call the manufacturer or the supplier. So roundabout way, I got a hold of Velux, talked to somebody in our customer service team or the Velux customer service team at the time. I remember distinctly them saying, "Hey, do you got a fax machine?" Which I did. They faxed over about a 10-page document that was the installation instructions, and they walked me through it step by step on how these things get installed. And said, get up there and take a look, pull the cladding back, pull the flashing back, and see if this thing's wrapped with underlayment. And it wasn't. And he goes, if it's not, remove the flashing, wrap it, put it back together, and your problem will go away. And sure enough, that's what I did, and problem went away.
So it was just condensation the whole time.
It was, yeah.
All I'm thinking about when you're saying that, Wayne, is if someone called today, a homeowner, and said, "This is what I'm having an issue with," and you guys were to advise someone, "All right, climb up on your roof, pull the cladding back. I want you to look at this detail."
The 90s, man.
I know.
The 90s.
It's
well, this will tell you something about me. It's also a 12-12 pitch. I live in an A-frame style house, so it's a 12-12 pitch.
Yeah, but back in the 90s, you could walk a 12-12 pitch. Like,
oh, I wish.
You can't walk them anymore.
I didn't have my roofer feet about me back then. I do these days, but back then it was it was get out the 30-foot extension ladder. Fortunately, Dad had one of those, and use a car in the driveway to keep it from kicking out, and push that thing up the roof and get up there to open it up.
It's funny. It's such a random story, but your comment just reminded me of it. Having roofer feet, and I remember being real little, and my neighbor had mulch delivered to their house. And dump truck lifts up. He's got mulch in it, but there's mulch stuck way up. And the guy walks up the bed of the dump truck and gets up there and starts shoveling the mulch out. And I am enamored. And I look at my neighbor's name was Phil. I'm like, "Phil, how's he do that?" Like, I couldn't understand how he walked up the dump truck when the dump truck's fully tilted. And he looked at me, he goes, "Oh, he's got balance." And at that age, I didn't know what balance was. And that's like for I don't know how long, weeks, months, days, whatever it was. But all I kept thinking, all I wanted to learn was, how do I get balance? I want to be able to walk up something like that. So your comment about having roofer feet, I mean, it's real. Like, you watch someone that's comfortable on a roof, they can walk up a 12-12 pitch, not think anything of it. And you get someone that's uncomfortable with it, a 6-12 pitch is, they're tripping and falling off it.
Yeah. If you want to get roofer feet, spend some time with the roofing crew. You'll pick it up pretty quick.
You got it. Yeah.
Honestly, when I first started with Velux, back then, one of the ways they trained us, we had service techs around the nation. So I went up to Chicago and spent time with our service tech who had been with us at that time, probably 15, 20 years. And I'll never forget it, that one of the first jobs he took me out on was a 3-story condo complex, which is pretty common in Chicago, townhome style homes. And to go up a 40-foot extension ladder and transition from the top of that ladder onto that roof, I was questioning whether I had made the right decision. And he assured me, he goes, "No, A, this doesn't happen very often, especially down your way. You won't be doing this. And B, you get roofer feet about you. You'll get comfortable." And to his credit, he said, but the key to a long life is not to get too comfortable.
Yeah.
And I've always remembered that. And you got to be safe when you're up there too.
You need extension ladder feet too, because you get on a 40-foot extension ladder, and that's like a different beast, especially when it starts moving. You're like, this is so sketchy.
You look around, you're like, all right, which part of this is going to fail?
Yeah.
And where do I go?
Dude, my dad always had these ghetto ladders too, where I'm like, I feel like they were free, they were bent, they didn't work correctly. And my dad at one point had the pick or extending scaffold, and it was like wood, just slats of wood that were together, and he would be up on that thing, and it would be moving and bouncing, and he's like, "You're fine," and then he's just shaking. I'm like holding on to the post the whole time. I'm like, I'm not fine at all. I don't trust this. They make metal picks now that we don't need to be on this telescopic wooden pick from 50 years ago.
He probably still has it.
I bet you he does, to be honest. I'm not even kidding. I
And
go
you'd
over
probably
there.
still use it too.
Oh yeah, he does. The ladders that he uses, I'm like, why are you on that? He's like, I'm 70 years old. It hasn't failed at this point. I'm like, I guess. I don't know.
Dude,
I would rather have a ladder that looks somewhat decent.
my grandfather had wooden extension ladders.
Yeah,
I remember
so
that
heavy.
too. Yeah, super heavy, but like you'd climb up them and they'd creak.
Yeah.
Same thing. You'd be like, you're fine. It's like you didn't tie anything off. You just leaned it against the roof where you hoped it didn't slip.
Yeah. My dad would make his posts for the roof jacks out of 2x4s, just like nailing them together.
What about
the aluminum poles?
Oh yeah. That's you're talking about pump jacks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Out of just 2x4s nailed
But that-
together,
but
and
that-
they'd be like they would
that is
sway
for that.
so much.
Like they were designed for that.
They were, but it still was sketchy. Like
No,
you have aluminum pump jacks
100%.
that don't move.
Right. With rubber on them, and they're
Yeah.
like, yeah. You'd watch them staple 2x4s together.
Way nicer.
Yeah, fortunately, technology has come a long ways, and there are definitely a lot more things out there to make it safe to be doing these things.
Hey guys, quick break from the podcast. Head over to moderncraftsman.co, scroll all the way to the bottom, and sign up for our newsletter. You're going to get a weekly email from us, but you're also going to get some episode recaps with actionable items that can help you improve your business and be more profitable. Now back to the podcast.
So we talk a lot on the podcast about this illusion that people have of having everything put together and understanding their path. And it sounds as though your path forward in life from the time, you were deciding what you wanted to do in college to what you're going to do for a career that you didn't necessarily know exactly where you were going to wind up. What kept you moving forward in the direction that you feel like you eventually landed in? Did you follow like any sort of advice? Was it, hey, I'm just going to listen to my heart? What kind of led you to where you are now? Because it seems as though your path was not necessarily from A to B.
No, it definitely wasn't. So I don't think anyone wakes up and says, I think I'm going to go into the skylight industry and build a, at this point, 26-year career selling skylights. It definitely, wasn't on my mind when I was in grade school, high school, or even college. But some early exposures to skylights really set the path, and I just didn't know it at the time. From my family had bought a condo up in northern Indiana, and to the builder's credit, I mean, they had a lofts that, back then, hard to air conditioning, hard to cool, put some venting skylights in them. So that was my very first exposure. That was in the early 80s, mid 80s. Couple venting skylights in the top of a loft of a townhome style condo. And we'd open them up and, it'd cool the place off really quick when we got up there. Fast forward, at that point, that was really our first exposure to it. My parents had moved the family to a new house, needed to finish off an attic space to give my sister a bedroom. I'm one of 4 kids. I had a younger sister and then us 3 brothers. And so they decided to put her upstairs and us kids down in the basement, the boys. And they decided, those skylights at the condo were nice. Let's do that in this renovation. We added a couple venting skylights in that renovation. So, I mean, that was, and then you heard about my experience when I ultimately bought my house and had to replace some plastic bubbles. And then there was one other experience. My grandfather had a log cabin down in southern Indiana, also a lake house. And that's actually where I grew up initially, boating and whatnot. And my parents acquired that cabin at his passing, and we needed to renovate it. It was a 1960s log cabin. If I try to give you the image, and it's the dark logs, low ceilings, if you will. And my mom always wanted a sunroom, and we ended up adding a sunroom onto the cabin. And the builder, to the builder's credit, said, well, once we add this sunroom on, the light you're getting in through those vertical windows into that kitchen is going to be pretty much shut off. So he goes, I recommend a couple things. And this builder does a lot of work on this small lake, and just about every other house down there has skylights. He goes, I always put skylights in the sunroom. And there's a concept for that now. We call it borrowed light, where you really brighten that sunroom and pull it in through the vertical windows. But he said, I also recommend we add some skylights over the kitchen directly. And we did that, and it was just transformative. I mean, it really dramatically changed the look of that kitchen. And We also did it actually on the boathouse, which was kind of a unique application. And to this day, I still think some of the best applications for skylights are utility sheds, boathouses. I'll call them outdoor structures that you don't necessarily associate with putting a skylight. But I mean, this was a concrete block 1960s boathouse and there was no daylight in there at all, no windows. So when it was shut and down, it was dark. And a lot of times someone would forget to turn the light switch out, and we'd go down there and flip the switch and no light. Try changing a light bulb in a dark boathouse.
Yeah,
it's not fun. So just a couple, 3x4 skylights, and it totally transformed that boathouse. Through those experiences, I really came to value what a skylight can do. And like I said, fast forward when I really was kind of open to a new career path. Originally, I went, like I said, to school to be an architect, but didn't pursue it, changed to business, graduated with a business and entrepreneurship degree, management degree. But after, 4 years of chasing the almighty dollar and just not really being happy, said, you know what, this is something I think I could get behind is, selling skylights. I know a little bit about them. Knew a little bit about the company at that point, sent them a resume, and, next thing you know, I'm out selling skylights and transforming people's homes, working with builders, remodelers, architects. So it all kind of came full circle. And I started off as the Indiana, Kentucky sales representative, territory representative. Really enjoyed, those 4 years greatly because I was, on the streets making it happen and literally could see, whether it be Homerama type projects where they had no intentions of adding skylights. And then, after working with the builder and the architect, next thing you know, they're incorporating them and just the impact it would have on their homes. Working with remodelers, same kind of thing, using the example, the guys that do sunrooms and convincing them that, hey, you can have a better sunroom than the other guy by adding skylights. And then just seeing the impact, not only that the trade people would have when they witnessed it firsthand, but what their consumers would experience.
Yeah.
And I always say, if you're a builder, if you take, two homes, similar floor plans, one with skylights, one without, and open them up, like a model home kind of format where you run people through them and then ask consumers afterwards which one they liked better. It can be very similar floor plans, very similar design and decoration interior wise. They invariably will say the one with skylights. And the thing that's interesting though, and it's a challenge for us actually, is they won't necessarily know why. I don't know. It just felt better. It's just more open. And then, well, did you notice that one was, daylit with a bunch of skylights? And then it's like, the aha moment, right? The light bulb goes off. That was the difference.
It was interesting too to see, like I know that there's a stigma around skylights and like the original skylights and the issues and that they were leaking and typically installer error. But then also like you forget about the production shift of home building and how production builders aren't utilizing skylights. And then like I never put any thought to truss roofs where it's like, yeah, what are you going to do for a skylight when you have this trussed roof and then you have utilities and insulation? It's got to be somewhat of an uphill battle for your company when there's all of these changes and the stigmas around skylights. And I never really put that much thought to it before, but it was interesting to hear that perspective, even just with like the truss roof and how much everything's gone that way. How difficult it would be to integrate that into your process if you already don't have it in there.
Yeah, no, you bring up a lot of really important points. First one is just the perception that all skylights leak are problematic. Unfortunately, that skylights really kind of took off in the late 60s into the 70s as a design element. Because they do help designers overcome design challenges, interior, daylighting the core of a space. I mean, some of the things we just talked about in terms of, borrowed light and whatnot. But the thing is, once the industry really took off, a lot of players tried to enter the industry, and there's some, unfortunately, some pretty crappy product out there that was put into the marketplace as well. And there's different design and installation methodologies at play as well. You guys have probably heard the terms self-flash or pan flash, and then you got curb mount, and you got deck mount. In different regions of the country use different methodologies, but really a lot of the plastic bubbles that were sold in the 70s into the 80s were a self-flash type bubble that were just tarred down to the roof deck. I mean, they were only as good as the sealant you were using, and they were problematic. I mean, they just were. Fortunately, there were also quality products out there that were glass based. That were step flashed in. And if you're not familiar with step flashing, it's the same way we put a dormer on a house or a chimney on a house. We weave step flashing in with the shingles, and it's a dry installation. There's no caulks or adhesives used. And if you put a 25, 30-year roof down, properly installed, that should last problem-free for 25, 30 years. And Velux has always made a quality glass product with engineered step flashing kits. We would call it a system approach. You get a quality deck mount skylight or curb mount skylight. And then we have an engineered flashing kit to match that gives you that assurance that you're not going to have problems, in the short term or the long term. And that just wasn't true in the 60s and 70s into the 80s.
It's crazy to think how much we rely on sealants and adhesives and tapes these days. That's something I've been concerned about for a while, especially when we're discussing the envelopes of homes, and how much better things would be if we were integrating just more traditional flashing details.
For sure.
You're not getting the air sealing, which I think that you could probably address in one way or another. But I think that we do rely a lot on adhesives and sealants, where there's probably better options.
Well, I mean, to that point, I've thought about that in reference or in comparison to commercial. I think about some of the high-rise projects I've been part of. You have these precast panels, and every window, there's no flange or tape. Everything's caulked in, and it's usually backer rod and then 2 beads of caulking. But the difference is on a situation like that is it's designed to be replaced. Mm-hmm. Like that caulking will eventually need to be replaced, and that's part of the envelope maintenance over time. It might be 25 years, but it has to be done. Where I think in residential, you kind of expect that doesn't have to be maintained.
Yeah, and it's also a lot of times I feel like inaccessible because it was never planned to be maintained in the first place, Right. Or you don't know when it's not doing its job, or you have an issue and you go to the caulk or the tar like you were discussing,
right,
where it's like you're only making this way worse because now like the water's still getting in from somewhere else and now you're just trapping it.
Well, what's interesting is Velux has always led with our deck mount product. Us old school guys say deck is best. And if it's on my house, it's going to be a deck mount skylight with one of our engineered flashings. And then a close second would be our curb mount. Now, there's certain applications where curb mount makes sense, flat roofs and whatnot, where our deck's not appropriate. And then there's that wild child called self-flash. And for years, Velux didn't offer it or make it. In certain parts of the country, you get down into Florida, Georgia, Carolinas a little bit. Self-flash is just an accepted method of installation. And for years, we kept just saying, guys, switch to deck. It's better. Step flash it in. But the trades, the roofing industry down there is, self flash is just an accepted method. And down there, they don't have the real cold temperatures, so they don't have I'll call it the condensation issues. And it works. So we finally said, all right, well, if we give them what they want, at least we can establish a relationship with these contractors and maybe have a better opportunity to educate them on the advantages of a properly step flashed in skylight. And like I said, today we offer all 3 installation methodologies, and we think we got a better spin on it in terms of the way we make the product. But again, I'm old school. I still like a step flashed in product, and if it's on my house, that's what I'm going to use.
So something that I want to talk about from a listener's perspective and a life experience perspective, and has nothing to do with skylights, which is also a tough subject, but I would have assumed it's got to be something that's important to you. You mentioned it in your story, but you said that you lost your older brother in a tractor accident.
I did.
And you were in college at that point?
I was. It was my senior year of college, and like I said, we were running a landscaping business, and like I said, we grew up around tractors, and it's Unfortunately, I think it probably came down to I just got a little too comfortable. But
Yeah.
we had rented a backhoe, and he was grading out a hillside. And long story short, got a little squirrely, and it flipped. He got thrown off, and it rolled down on top of him. So fortunately or unfortunately, I wasn't there. My buddy that I was running the business with was. I was actually down in the Carolinas with my girlfriend, taking a much needed little vacation or getaway. And like I said, got the call in the evening that my brother had passed away.
Yeah, I can. I lost a good buddy of mine when I was 19, and I'm still in touch with his brothers today. And I know how difficult that has been, even at this point, 25 years later, for them to try and cope with. So I, not that I understand, but I definitely feel for you and have a tiny bit of perspective as to how that can, affect your life and your family. Do you think that has made your approach to life and your perspective on time? You mentioned how the hands of time continue to move faster and faster. Do you think that a lot of that perspective is and your life perspective is based on that experience?
For sure. I mean, it can't help but impact the way you view things. But it wasn't just my brother. I had a close friend. At this point, once you get some years under your belt, we all know somebody that passed probably prematurely. Another good friend of mine who had just started his family, 3 kids, developed colon cancer and passed away quite suddenly and tragically. That one, accidents happen. I guess you can kind of dismiss that, and then when the health issues start surfacing with some of your friends and family members, you start to realize that there's just no guarantees in life. Make the most of it.
Yeah, it's scary. We're going through that right now with my father-in-law, and I think a lot of times you just lose perspective of that, or you lose sight of that, or time passes, or you just write it off like it's not close enough to me. I'm 39, and one of my good friends from growing up, her husband just got diagnosed with like a pretty significant brain tumor, and he's around our age, and I'm like, it hits you a lot more when it's somebody who's your age, and you can, like, there's a metric to gauge that, where it's like, yeah, at this point now, I'm not 25, I'm not invincible. Shit happens, people get sick, and it does put a perspective on things that sadly can provide a lot of clarity for you while you're trying to figure out what's important in life.
For sure.
So you said that you took this job with Velux, and that it provides like that outlet for you. You said you were going to be an architect. You like to tinker. You like the hands-on aspect of your job and of what you're doing. Did you know going into this project that it was going to provide like that type of experience for you?
Not as much as it has. So the job description was obviously interfacing with builders, roofers, remodelers, architects, and our dealer base. So we run the full gamut, which is nice. One of the reasons I think I've stuck around so long is just the diversity of what we do as sales reps for Velux, because we do interface with all those different parties, so to speak. But the most rewarding part of it is being able to influence that designer, builder, remodeler, and really show them the power of skylights or daylighting through the roof. A phrase that a lot of us use at Velux is, the most impactful, least costly remodeling project you can undertake is daylighting your home with skylights. And I truly believe that's true. I mean, people spend a fortune on hardwood floors, granite countertops, and all these things. But if it's a 1960s, 1970s, 8-foot ceiling, ranch style house, it freshens it up, but it really isn't that dramatic of a change. You open up that ceiling and lift the ceiling, so to speak, open that up, bring in some daylight and fresh air for that matter through the roof. Now we're talking about transformative. And I guess I've done it so many times, and I've seen the results firsthand so many times that it's just, I love it. And it doesn't get old seeing the expressions on people's faces when you actually pull that off.
Yeah, I like something you said that skylights aren't just for light; they're for comfort, health, and emotion. And I think that's pretty good insight. And there's a lot of renovations that we've done where adding natural light, adding a window, adding a door, adding skylights was like the biggest impact. And I'm like, we put so much money into so many other things, and you spent so much money on finishes. And I'm like, we could have just cut these windows in and been done.
Yeah, and like I said, depending on the application. I mean, if it's the core of a space, I mean, there's, you take that, a townhome, for example, where you've got, adjacent townhomes off both sides. Mm-hmm. The only place you can bring daylight in through vertical windows is in the front and the back of that structure. And if it's a deep structure, really bringing it in from overhead's the way to do it.
We had a project in the city. It was actually, I don't know, it wasn't a row home, but they were really tight. They had like 2-foot alleys between the homes. And they had an 8-foot by 8-foot backyard, or I'm sorry, back deck, which had like 2 foot of space. So it was basically 100 square feet. And they ultimately wanted to expand their kitchen and take up the deck space, and they were going to lose all that space. But the number one thing that they talked about when we started that project was, we need natural light in this kitchen. The existing one is so dark. We have this window, we have this large slider, and I had, we had pitched them on doing I think it's the SkyMax, the big one. And, and we had said, what if we install a really large skylight? And the client ultimately ended up going for it. And to what you said, the emotion, when you walked into that kitchen, you'd approach the kitchen and be like, man, this is a really nice kitchen. Wow. Why is there so much natural light? And then you got into there, and there was just this massive piece of glass that captured everything above it, and every other window in that home was just, what didn't capture light because there was a house 2 feet away from it. And every project we've done to date, anytime we've built or remodeled in a space that has access to a roof, we've always pitched it. For us, I think that, tying back to the emotion, it's always the way that we, I think that I'm going to kind of classify, like, there's this typical install where it's like you just punch the opening, you bring in the light, and it's in the room, and it's a skylight. And every project we've done, we've always tried to push that limit to more of a, my favorite buzzword, but more of an intentional detail. And it's just a matter of moving it in a little bit of in one direction or the other to do something different than it typically would. One of my favorite examples, it was a very inexpensive skylight, very small, but they wanted this small skylight above a staircase, and it was originally drawn to be directly over the staircase itself. And we had moved it, and we actually pushed it up against the wall. So one of the walls extended all the way up to the glass, and it actually made the space brighter because as the sun poured in, it actually reflected across the entire wall surface. And it's those little moments that I like, we talk about them, and then they happen, and then the project is done, and you look at it and you realize how dramatic that micro detail is, and tying it back to something as, quote unquote, simple as adding a skylight to that space. But it's interesting how the concept of skylights is still centered around, oh, they leak, oh, they're just a warranty nightmare. But on the flip side, they don't leak when they're installed correctly, and they're hugely impactful.
Well, and I think we've come a long ways from really that perception. So we're on our 3rd generation of product right now. So we had our 1st generation that really started early 80s through 1994. Then we came out with our 2nd generation, which from 95 up through 2010. Our current generation product, or our 3rd generation, started in 2010. And this, obviously, the leak issue was an issue that we were battling as an industry and as a company. And so we decided when we came out with our 3rd generation product that we really needed to bring confidence back to the marketplace. People love what skylights do. You talk to any roofer, contractor, builder, they'll say, yeah, I love what they do, but there's the risk reward ratio, right? And we had to get that back to where the risk wasn't there and the reward was all that you were, capitalizing on. And so, I mean, we actually did something that you're not supposed to do in the world of marketing, and we branded our third generation the No Leak Skylight. And we brought a warranty to the table, a 10-year no leak product and labor warranty, 10-year comprehensive warranty. And that we think has really achieved what we were hoping to do, which is bring confidence back to the marketplace. And
how did you, like, from a strategic standpoint, how did you actually execute that? Was it was it strictly just branding, or was there more, technical input?
No, great question. So the first and second generation products were actually very good products, and they weren't. We still have our first generation product. A lot of them we still replacing them today that are 40, 45 years old out in the marketplace. Installed properly, those things would perform quite well. Now they just weren't very forgiving. If you didn't install them properly, they'd come back to bite you, potentially. And so with the third generation product, we did something unique. I mean, so it was a ground up redesign of the product where we incorporated 3 redundant layers of protection. So if you look at our current deck mount design, the first layer is an integrated deck seal, call it a continuous mounting bracket that has a closed cell foam that serves really as the first layer of protection. It does seal this thing down to the deck nice and tight. With our third generation, our current product, we now include an adhesive underlayment in the flashing kits. And that's something that with the first 2 generations, we expected the contractor to go source. And a lot of times, I mean, you know how that goes. If you're not supplying it, it may or may not get used. And quite honestly, if it's our older generation product and it was problematic, it's very similar to what happened on my own house. It was never wrapped properly with underlayment. And like I said, Velux as a manufacturer wasn't supplying that at the time, but it's always been in our instructions to do that. But you would have had to bring that to the table on your own. So with our current product, we provide that in the box. And then, of course, we have our engineered flashing systems. And if there's something that really has made Velux the world leader in skylights, it is that engineered flashing system. It's nobody's got anything comparable to it. It's second to none, and it works very, very well when it's installed properly. To where those first 2 layers really aren't, you're hopefully not relying on them. They're there in the event that you do make an error. But like I said, our current stuff is performing very, very well. We've had it in the marketplace now. We're going on just over 15 years. And it speaks for itself in terms of just how few issues we've had.
And even that deck seal, it's sealed directly to the unit itself, and you're not putting any sort of sealant on that's just going straight onto your plywood.
That is correct. So the first 2 generations had like brackets, mounting brackets, 4 or 6 brackets that you would screw down to the deck. And then you had a really rough opening. And so our current generation product has a continuous L bracket, if you will, and we call it a deck seal, but it's a continuous bracket that serves that not only as the mounting bracket, but also as a seal down to the roof deck. On the underside of that is a closed cell foam gasket that seals nice and tight to the roof deck.
But I'm looking at the brochure. Sorry, Nick, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, but so you have all the tech there and all the product, but when you say you're warranting the labor, I guess where I'm going with this is, I think a lot of people hear product warranties, and there is this kind of stigma that a product warranty means nothing because the vendor is just going to come out and tell me it was installed wrong, and they're going to wash their hands. And we've all dealt with it. Anyone that's listening to this has dealt with that. So when you say there's a labor warranty, what is qualifying an issue to be covered under that warranty?
No, that's fair. So yes, it does require that the product be installed per instructions. So the one thing I will say, and like I said, I've worked for Velux 26 years, is if you're using a Velux product and you have a problem with it, we're going to go out and help you. There's no question about it.
So I have a leaking skylight. Velux comes out, inspects it, and at that point they determine whether it was installed correctly or not.
Correct. We'll usually try to engage the contract. If the contractor's still involved, sometimes they are, sometimes they aren't. But the first step is always to engage the contractor and say, hey, understand you're having a problem with one of our products. We'd like to come out, with you and take a look at it together. And most of the time, unfortunately, it does come down to an installation issue. But most contractors are very thankful to have somebody that's knowledgeable come out and just kind of walk them through what they did wrong. Here's the few things that you got to correct, and the problem goes away.
Well, Wayne, I think that's the key here. Is you're absolutely right. A lot of guys really appreciate that someone comes out and inspects it, right? So if it's an install error, like you're on site and saying, hey, Nick, you installed this incorrectly, and you're going to point out what I did incorrectly, and I'm there and I want this to be fixed, and I'm thinking that you're going to come in and tell me it's a product thing and we're going to hash this out, but come to find out I installed something incorrectly, but you're pointing out exactly what it is and I can address it immediately, rather than 4 layers of tar hoping that it eventually stops leaking,
right?
And I think that going into it, where it's, because I think about it in terms of there's vendors that will say they do cover warranty. I mean, the material and labor from a warranty perspective, they might just automatically just pay the claim, and they're not coming out and understanding what the issue is, or they're just gonna assume that it's installed correctly, or hey, we'll give you a product and then prove to us that it was installed correctly. Instead, you guys are being proactive and going out there and actually inspecting it. And I think that's the key here, is that you've put the technology in place to make sure that there's 3 steps to leak prevention, but you're also standing behind it in the sense of, hey, we'll come out if there's an issue, we'll come out and we'll either replace the thing and pay to have it replaced if it's a product failure, or we're going to work with your contractor and get this thing fixed.
Sure. And like I said, the good news is with our current generation product, I mean, the number of service calls, if you will, that we go on these days is significantly reduced.
What's the number one issue you see?
Number one issue we see with Skylights, it used to be they weren't wrapped properly, and it would lead to condensation issues in colder climates. Today, with our current generation product, that's still, now that the adhesive underlayment's in the box, it's not the most common thing, but I would still say it's probably just folks that don't know how to properly step flash, where they think, I mean, Velux used to use larger step tins, and guys would think you'd go 2 and 3 courses of shingles per step tin. Well, the whole concept of step flashing goes out the window when you do that. So we've shortened them up now, with the idea of helping guys out to understand that each course of shingle has its own respective step tin. But it's amazing how many roofers, our sales team trains and teaches how to roof, and I mean that sincerely. I've been on a roof with a lot of roofers that just didn't fully, understand step flashing and the proper mechanism by which it works. So today that's probably still the biggest issue we run into, and we look at it as an opportunity, right, to engage a contractor, teach them, the right way to do things, and turn somebody that was maybe had a problem with the Skylight into an advocate for them, because once they do learn the proper installation, and it's not hard. I mean, I can do a properly step flash Skylight just as fast as any other type of Skylight, and know that it's going to last 25, 30 years without giving you a problem. And once you give that contractor that's, not really educated on proper step flashing and how to do it right, that knowledge, they become an advocate for us.
I'm over here nerding out on the installation manual and the step flashing details. I mean, see, the thing that blows my mind, it's Windows. It's like, obviously there's more Windows than Skylights in the world, but I guarantee you there's just as many window installations that leak as Skylights. It's just that people don't see it.
Well, no, because the Skylight's above you, right?
Correct. But I guarantee, and if you walk a new construction house, I don't want to throw a number out there, but there's a lot that I see that the windows are installed incorrectly, and the stakes may not be quite as high because it's a vertical plane rather than a horizontal or semi-horizontal plane. But you guys get a bad rap for your product, just like any other window company does, because somebody doesn't follow installation instructions. And I'm looking at your installation instructions, and I'm not a roofer. I've cut in skylights into a roof. I've cut in roof vents. I've cut in sun tunnels from you guys. Like, your installation instructions are dialed and tell you exactly how to do it. Like, if you're a roofer, this should not be that hard, right?
Shouldn't be.
Right?
Yeah, and it really isn't. And honestly, like I said, gentlemen, I mean, we sell hundreds of thousands of skylights a year, and we've got a pretty small sales team. In terms of field support, sales reps, about 50 employees out there in the field selling. Now we got other field personnel, but in terms of territory reps, for hundreds and hundreds of thousands of skylights that we sell every year. So again, I want to make sure we're very clear that the issues that were really common in the 70s, 80s, even into the early 90s with these new generation of skylights, the problems are very, very few.
I think a lot. I know I had my roofer out to a job where they had a couple of skylights installed, and one of the issues they were running into, where it's like, you guys are creating a no caulk system, and they were caulking the keyways like up against the skylight too, which is just trapping all of that dirt and then water. And he's like, this is one of, like, I see this all the time, or they'll cut their shingles too close to the skylight itself, and he's like, you have to give this some room and do not caulk this area around them, which again is like user error.
And like I said, there's a whole new generation of roofers coming into the industry today that don't have the biases of the past. When I say the bias, where they feel like they've got to break out a tube of caulk or a bucket of bowl and start tarring around it. But you're absolutely right. A lot of the problems that do exist out there from guys that think they're doing something to help the situation, when really all they're doing is causing problems. Manufacturers provide detailed instructions for a reason, and generally speaking, not generally, almost always, if you follow the instructions, you're going to be just fine. And that's definitely true with our product.
They're usually the first thing to go in the garbage. I don't need them. Wait, what's this screw for? I got one extra screw here. Now I'm going to open up the instructions, see what's going on. You mentioned that you're a tinkerer, you enjoy reading. I think it was funny you mentioned that was it the Britannica encyclopedia? Like, you recently bought, I guess not that recently, but you bought the entire catalog of encyclopedias because someday you may feel like you want to read them.
So hopefully there's a few listeners out there that can appreciate this. I mean, I was a kid in the 70s and the 80s, and we did have that World Book Encyclopedia on the shelf. When you had to go do a research project, that was the first place you turned as a kid, right?
I grew up in the 90s. We used it.
I feel like they would try and sell them door to door also.
Well, they were. So that was the thing in the 70s and 80s. And obviously my parents bought in hook, line, and sinker because we had the complete set on the shelf in the office. But as a kid, I would literally get every topic under the sun. And they, of course, the World Book had great pictures, So you'd start into on a school research project of some kind that you were supposed to be doing. And next thing you know, you're reading into all these random topics of different things that you just didn't even know about. So I really enjoyed that as a kid. And some of my buddies have blown me so much crap because I think it was 2009 or 10. The the Encyclopedia Britannica had announced that they were no longer going to print. The number of sales had dropped off to the point where it just wasn't profitable to do a printed edition. I think it was less than 10,000 volumes were produced the last series. And they were having troubles even getting rid of those.
It's because the internet exists.
Exactly. And I fully understand that. I indulged and bought the whole collection, actually sitting right across from me here. But I have the last 2010 version of the Encyclopedia Britannica. And one of these days I'll hopefully have some time to sit around and read it.
You said that at some point when you're old and possibly decrepit, hopefully your eyes still work well enough to sit down and read that.
Yeah.
You also mentioned that you did a couple of marathons.
I have. So for anyone that's been a traveling salesman, like I said, I was a territory rep for 4 years, and that wasn't too bad. Then I took a promotion to a district manager, which had me travel in 6 states. Then you start doing some traveling, and I started putting on some weight, and just as a way to try to keep the weight off and still be able to eat what I wanted, I started running, and got into doing 5Ks and 10Ks. And once you get into a running group, and connect with a bunch of like-minded individuals, the next thing you know, they're pushing you to run half marathons. So you start running half marathons, and then the question always comes up if you're in one of these running groups is, have you run a marathon? Or and you don't want to answer no. So next thing you do, you sign up and start running marathons. So yeah, like I said, I enjoy the 5Ks, 10Ks, the halves. I've done probably 20, 25 of those. And those you can kind of tackle without a whole lot of training. Not recommended, but you can get through it. And I tried a similar approach with my first marathon, which was the San Diego. I've got a thing for San Diego. It's just a beautiful city. And it kicked my butt, quite honestly.
At what mile were you like, I didn't do enough training?
Well, the longest training run I think I did for that one was the half marathon leading up to it, so a 13, but I never got into those 16, 17, 18 mile training runs that you're supposed to do.
And that's when it screws you up.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. And once I got up to that, you hit the wall, and it was probably around that 17, 18 miles.
Yeah.
And then it's just grit, right, to get through it. And so lesson learned. I reattempted a decade later and took on Chicago and ran the Chicago Marathon. Much better experience. I wasn't struggling as bad, but I had another decade of age on me as well. And
that's the thing. It's like, all right, so you went from being 30 to being 40. There's a big difference between 30 and 40, even training aside.
For sure. And I've already passed my 50th, and I did not undertake a third marathon. So
you can do 60 in the cards.
I don't know. I'm also a snow skier, and I'm trying to preserve the knees a little bit.
Like downhill.
Try to get out to Colorado every year, somewhere out west. But so I really enjoy
running. Is brutal on the knees. It's like especially long distance. It's just like your legs are just absolutely toast.
And it's like a lot of things. I mean, if you talk to an orthopedic surgeon, they can tell if you're a runner, a consistent runner or not. So your body does adapt. They would tell you not necessarily.
The long distance,
as long as you train properly.
Oh, right.
And I think that's the catch is, I've never conditioned myself or trained consistently enough to be doing those kind of distances. And at this point in my life, I'm not sure I want to commit the time. I mean, it takes a lot of time to commit to training properly for a marathon.
Did you run in the morning or after work?
Generally, I'm a morning runner before the heat and humidity. I live in Indianapolis, and we get hot and humid in the summer. Yeah. So early morning runs is kind of gets your day off to a great start. But again, my main motivation was just to keep the weight off and try to stay healthier.
Did you ski as a kid?
No, honestly, unless you want to count the hill in our backyard where we strapped on some of those Sears, those really skinny skis that have a little spring on the back. But no, the first time I went skiing was high school, actually. Yeah. And my uncle took us up to Boyne, Michigan, northern Michigan, and my brothers and I just. All of I think 350 feet of vertical, but to us that was a monster. My family honestly didn't travel much growing up. We weren't a vacationing type family just because again the commitment to the hardware store and the retail lifestyle, if you will. But once we went up to Michigan, I was hooked. And then we started. I joined a fraternity in college and joined the Ball State Ski Club, which had us getting on a Greyhound bus and going out west for the first time. And after that, I was hooked. And so just about every year, I'm going somewhere to get some skiing in.
Where's your favorite place to ski in Colorado?
I need to go back. In my mind, I would say Steamboat Springs. And I say that because it's a little bit off the beaten path. But rumor has it it's not so much off the beaten path anymore, and it's gotten quite popular. But I loved the tree skiing. It's known for its skiing through the trees, and it wasn't as crowded as all your centrally located resorts in Colorado. But so I think fondly of that, but there's not a bad one out there. I like them all.
I went out to Whistler 2 years ago. I went to school for a minute in Colorado, so I skied a bunch out there, but I went to Whistler. Have you been?
I have not. That's on my bucket list for sure.
Yeah, so it's expensive, but super cool. It's not like a ton of elevation change. It's just expansive. And then like there's no on and off piece. You take a lift up and you can ski whatever you want. Like if you want to go in the trees, you can go in the trees. If you don't want to, you could ski across the whole mountain side to side. Super cool. One of my favorite places I've skied before, and like absolutely beautiful as well. It's just I don't know. I don't ski as much as I used to. Maybe I'll ski once a year. With kids, it's tough. They never started skiing.
Sure.
It's expensive, but I feel like every time I get back out skiing again, it's scary for the first little bit. I'm like, this is sketchy.
Gotta get your ski legs back about
Ski
you.
legs, it's like roof legs.
Yep.
Or the roof feet.
I don't know. Like I said, it's just it's one of those. Like I said, I look forward to that week where I just get away and kind of unplug and get up in the mountains. And I mean, if you've done it, you know what I'm talking about. If you haven't, I encourage everyone to give it a go because it's beautiful out there.
Do you know I forgot that you mentioned also? Now that I'm looking to kind of close things out, is that didn't you get your pilot's license?
I did.
You were trying to.
I did. So
do you fly anymore or no?
No, it's a very expensive hobby.
Yeah, skiing.
Yeah, no. So through the high school I went to, they had a ground school. You could take
oh wow!
I grew up, when I say building stuff, I mean I was really into the remote controlled RC airplanes and cars and boats. The gas powered stuff. So like from 3rd, 4th grade on, I was building model airplanes, and so that's really where my interest took off. Took off in terms of aviation. And then there was an airport down the street from my house that was looking for line crew summer. So small little local airports do a lot more volume or business in the summer months, and they take on some part-time help. So I went on, and this was my sophomore year of high school, and I was still doing some lawn care at the time as well, but I was working there part-time doing line crew, basically fueling airplanes, washing, waxing airplanes, and then on weekends, I'd work the front desk, collect the money for them. But everything I made there, I was spending trying to get my wings, get my pilot's license. So, which I did do just after my 18th birthday. Got about 125 hours, and quickly realized that it is a very expensive hobby. And as much as I loved it, it's just not something I've continued. But it was a great experience, and just the knowledge and education that came with going through that process is pretty cool.
Did you ever? Sorry, Nick. Did you ever see the old RC? Well, they're not RC planes, but like where they would fly them on strings in a circle.
Oh, that's where I started.
That's all right. I didn't want to like date you because I know they're old, but there's some guys that I know who are like into build. Like you could build them yourselves, or you could get kits. And I'd never seen them before, but then I went to like where we ride dirt bikes, and they were out in the field flying them around in a circle. So it, like, if I were to explain it to somebody, and I explained this to him, and he actually got like bent out of shape that I compared it to this, but like to me, it kind of looked like you're flying a kite, but there's an RC plane with like a prop on the end of it. You have like 2 strings, right? In the plane, you start the motor, and then you just go in a circle, like around and around. And I told him that, like, as I was telling him that I explained it to my daughter once, and he's like, yeah, it's not really like a kite at all. And I was like, I don't mean to insult you, but like, that's what it looked like to me.
Well, I assume they're still out there. I mean, this is going to age, but back in the 70s, I mean, they call them control lines. Yeah. And, they used to have just a little handle, 2 strings that would go and attach to the airplane. And Cox engines, they were real small little nitro engines. And again, I grew up on a cul-de-sac, so we had a little circle at the end of our driveway. And you would just stand in the middle of the circle, and this thing would just go in circles. And
it's so loud.
and just it would go up and down, and but that's where it started. I probably 7, 8, 9 years old when we were playing with those things, and it just graduated from there to the, I call it the real deal, where you got the remote control and the bigger engines. And but when I say age me, I remember in grade school, I went to a Catholic grade school, 1st through 8th, and remember science fair projects.
Yeah.
So I was always bringing the engines in and things like that, and doing those for science fair projects. But I this would never fly today, but I would literally lug like a 63-inch wingspan airplane to school, a gallon of gasoline.
Nitro.
Amazing.
Yeah, no, it was nitro, but it said gasoline with a pump, and it would sit over there at the corner of the classroom, and then recess. If I wasn't playing kickball or whatever, I'd take my plane out and teach all the kids how to fly this thing at recess. But so I was really into it, and like I said, that led to my first actually it was sophomore junior year working at that airport. But
I had a nitro RC car when I was little. I mowed a bunch of lawns, saved up a bunch of money, and the smell of the nitro when they were flying the planes, I was like, oh my god, that brings me back to when I was 12 years old. It has a very, very distinct smell. I can't imagine flying them in a cul-de-sac though. With that would have, I'm sure the parents were like, Jesus, Wayne's got the friggin' plane out again, because it's just every time it goes around, they're so loud.
Well, the control lines we would do there. Once we got into the bigger planes, we'd go out to a big field.
Yeah.
So
I just feel like the control lines are just nonstop. Every 5 seconds, you get the plane just flying by so loud. That's funny though. Yeah, I've seen them twice, and he was told me about him. He's like, yeah, just a super old antique RC planes before they obviously had radio control planes. But I didn't want to date you and say, have you seen these before? But I'm glad that you did, and I don't look like I'm crazy.
Yeah, and I would assume they're still out there, but don't know for certain. I
think that there's people who are diehard hobbyists with them. So the last question I have for you, you've experienced a fair amount of life, right? You've taken risks. You figured out your path in life. You mentioned you've had a handful of really terrible losses. But what matters the most to you now at this stage of the game, where you are in life?
I would say, like I said, I'm 53 for the record. Been at Velux 26 years. Settled in. I've got a wonderful girlfriend that lives with me. Been together a little over 3 years now. Just committed to. We got a couple dogs now, so we're thinking about settling down, which is a big step for a guy like me. That's been. And I, like I said, I've been single off and on, but looking at that next step possibly. But it's life passes you by really fast.
Yeah.
And careers pass you by really fast. I feel very fortunate to have landed at a wonderful company that values its employees, that builds great products that are useful to society. That I can feel good about what I'm out talking about and preaching about every day. And what's moving forward for me, I think what's important, I'm going to call it work-life balance. Earlier in my career, part of it's the traveling. Having as a district manager, I was responsible for 6 states. I'm now in a new role, actually, as of about a year and a half ago, where I have more territory. I've actually got 15 states, but I'm working exclusively with Skylight specialists. So I went from a number of reps working with all kinds of customers to really focused in on our best customer base in terms of specialists that live and breathe Skylights, and working with them to be more efficient at what they do, more effective at what they do. It's a two-part role. One is helping them develop their businesses to where they're running a successful Skylight specialist business. And then 2, recruiting new specialists in areas where we still need them. And there's a number of markets and cities where we still don't have a specialist. One of the biggest challenges we have at Velux is we spend millions of dollars in advertising, generating interest for skylights. If you watch HGTV, for example, you'll see that we're involved in all of their major projects, and it generates a lot of consumer interest. And they may reach out to their roofer, remodeler, builder, and depending on where they're at with skylights, they may or may not support that consumer getting that product. Which is unfortunate because, and so we welcome the opportunity to work with more roofers, remodelers, and builders. But one of the things that we're trying to do is build out a Skylight Specialist Network where when that consumer goes to our website and says, I want to add a sun tunnel, I want to add a skylight, they're not calling, a roofer necessarily that says, well, do you need a new roof with that?
Yeah.
And then if they don't, it can be a kind of a dead end. It's where we have certified roofers, certified remodelers, certified builders, and specialists out there on our website that these consumers then can, reach out and actually have a good experience getting our product installed and getting it installed in a good way.
Yeah, I think that's super important, especially with what you do, because at the end of the day, like, it's similar to Windows where you get a bad rap if it leaks and it's your fault, right? It's Velux's fault, where it's like, it's not. So you have to ensure that you're aligning with people who understand what they have to do to dial that install so that that's not coming back and looking bad on your end. And I think that that's somewhat of the path and the key to growth, to make sure that you're protecting yourself and you're protecting your clients, and just, creating a good image around what you're doing.
Yeah, but back to your initial question, like I said, I thoroughly enjoy my career at Velux, so I don't see any changes pending there. I'm 26 years in. I hope to retire with this company. And it's not that unique at Velux, quite honestly. There's the gentleman that hired me retired after 32 years. And we have a number of folks that are 30, 35 years with the company. One of our biggest challenges actually is, our sales force is aging. I mean, there's a lot of guys like me out there, and, we need those new up and comers to join us, and hopefully carry on the torch. I do hope that I can put in another 7-10 years with this company, retire, and then really get back. That work-life balance is, like I said, this new role affords me a little bit more opportunity to do that than my previous role as a manager with direct reports and employees, and I'm just more focused. I'm not as pulled in so many different directions.
Well, hopefully you get a chance to start reading the encyclopedia soon. I'm really looking forward to that for you.
No rush on that. But a couple other things I would like to share just with the group.
Yeah, absolutely.
So a little bit about Velux. If you're not familiar with the company, the name Velux, I'm curious if you fellas know where it originates.
Do not.
VE for ventilation, and lux, the Latin word for light, ventilation and light. So,
dude, I would have never guessed that.
Yeah, and like I said, it's a unique company all the way down to the naming. We're a third generation, privately held, family-owned business, but the majority of the shares and the ownership is owned by a charitable foundation, the Willem Conrad Foundation, and I do like to share that. So awesome. When consumers out there are buying our products, contractors are using our products. A lot of the profits that are generated from those purchases goes back into charitable giving, which again, I think it's a unique setup in the way that we're structured. We just celebrated 50 years here in the United States, April 4th, 50 years
Happy
ago.
Birthday.
First started selling roof windows here in the United States. And so that's kind of a big deal. We're currently distributing over 40 countries. So, we are the world's leader in skylights and roof windows. And this year, we're doing something kind of innovative. We're all about value, right? We've launched something called the Skylight System. And as of the 7th of April here, just last week, we launched what we're calling the Skylight System. Now, we've always sold a system, which is, right, the skylight, the flashing kit. But in the past, shades or blinds were an additional item. Electronic controls and things were an add-on item. And what we know from research is the fact of the matter is, if a consumer gets a skylight with electronic controls, whether it be a venting skylight that they can open at the touch of a button versus getting out the old crank rod.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that as you were talking.
And we've done research into this. They don't get used as much, but when you can just push a remote control, they get used regularly. And then the importance of shades, and shades bring a lot of value. And in the past, they were optional. And it's amazing. Our shade ratio, depending on where you're at in the country, was 10 to 20% or so. But when our reps were involved, and we kind of learned this through COVID, during COVID, obviously the world shut down, and instead of laying off our employees, we said, hey, how can we keep our salespeople busy? And we quickly adapted to the situation by saying, hey, let's have our reps do consultations, virtual consultations. And so we put out there for consumers and contractors, anybody that really wanted to talk to us, that, hey, if you're considering Skylights, here's a opportunity to engage with an expert, a Velux, representative. And when we got involved in those projects firsthand, and most of our experience prior to that was calling on the trades. And with COVID, we started connecting directly with the consumer. And they were saying, yeah, I've been thinking about adding, Skylights to this remodeling project, whether it be kitchen, bath. And they, our reps would kind of handhold that project from start to finish, a lot of times putting them in touch with a contractor because they had struggled to even find one that wanted to, maybe do Skylights. But what we found is our venting ratio increased significantly, our shade ratio. And when I say significantly, I mean, it would go from 20, 30% up to 70+%. Our shade ratios would jump from that 10 to 20% up to 70 to 80%.
Wow.
And once the consumer was knowledgeable on the benefits, of the shade, whether it be light control, the energy efficiency gains and whatnot, they would select it. They would go with it. So as of April 7th this year, we are rolling out the Skylight system, where all standard glass skylights from Velux, our deck mount and curb mount products, will come standard with an integrated shade. And in the past, that was an add-on option that you would pay, upwards of $450, $500 for. Now that it's integrated as part of our production process, that cost has been significantly reduced. So we're adding a lot more value to the product with this introduction. So,
and that's just the standard moving forward. That's not like you guys are running a special. That's just that's amazing.
That is correct, and it's not the first time we've kind of done this. I mean, I like to. I'm from the Midwest, so bear with me on the car analogy. If you think about it, back in the 70s and 80s, if you bought a car, do you want power windows? Do you want an automatic? Do you want intermittent wipers?
Yeah.
You'd have all these add-ons, and now today, it just comes standard, right? You get power windows, you get intermittent wipers, almost automatic.
Get a backup camera now.
Backup cameras, sunroofs,
heated seats,
closer to home. I mean, they're pretty much just standard. So we're kind of taking a page out of that book, if you will, because it makes sense. It gives a consumer a better skylight experience. Improves the energy efficiency significantly. So it's a new direction we're taking this year, and I think it brings a lot of value to the product.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like that totally changes the game. And I think that, like you said, it's one of those things where if you give them the option a lot of times, and the car analogy is perfect, where it's like, if I were given the option, I just bought an excavator, and if I were given the option for some of the finishes they put on it, I probably would have said no. But when I went there and it was all fit out like that, I was like, yeah, give it to me.
Yeah.
And it's a much better product, to be honest. So I think that that's definitely the move and the right way to go, because at the end of the day, when you amortize the cost of that upgrade over the lifespan of that skylight, it's pennies. It makes sense.
Well, and actually, it's the insulation guys that sell insulation are pretty good at this. I mean, insulation and upgrading your windows and doors, right? Improving your energy efficiency of your envelope are the few improvements you can make to your home that actually pay for themselves over time. And the same is true with skylights. And we use a very energy efficient. We use Cardinal Lowy 366 glass. So the glass, it's still dual pane. It's laminated. It's very energy efficient. It's the most energy efficient dual pane glass you can really buy today, right? So the shades are partly about controlling the light when you want, which is nice, but still glass is the weakest point in a building's envelope, and by adding that shade, you're increasing the U value by about 45%.
Yeah.
Solar heat gain by 18, 19% or so. So there's still significant savings to be had by having that shade on there.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's really cool. I'm excited to see what's in store.
Wayne, we appreciate not only you being on the podcast, but Velux being a partner to the podcast. It's you guys have been great, and you've certainly supported a lot of our projects in the last decade of doing this. And like I mentioned earlier, it's one of those things that it's kind of standard for us. We see the value in bringing in natural light, and as you say, ventilated air. But we appreciate you.
Well, hey, we appreciate the opportunity to be on, and congratulations to you guys for the success you've had with the podcast. Like I said, I've had a chance to listen to quite a few episodes, and I think you guys bring a valuable service to the industry. Your open minded format and the topics you dig into, you're really educating, I'll call it the trades. And some of this stuff was this knowledge that you guys are sharing, as you guys know, it was hard to come by when you're out there, trying to grow a business in this industry.
Yeah.
And so thank you for what you guys are doing and continued success.
Yeah, absolutely. It was really great to meet you, and it was very interesting to hear and read and see your whole story. So I appreciate all the insight.
You're very welcome. And if anyone is trying to get some additional insights on Velux, please reach out to us. VeluxUSA.com is our domestic website. And through there, you can reach out and get a hold of your local representative. We'd love the opportunity to work with anybody that's interested in learning more about Skylights.
And then we'll get you Wayne's number, because he said 7 more years. So we got to flood him for the next 7 years. All right, Wayne, we appreciate your time.
All right. Thank you, fellas.
Thanks, Wayne.
I really enjoyed his whole backstory, and not everyone didn't get to see his whole backstory, but just like I don't know.
You were flying through it. I was like, there were so many points, but I was just letting you roll. I was like, there's so much here.
Yeah, I mean, there's just a ton, and he just provided us with so much insight, and I think that's what we've been looking to do, just to dig into more of the human side of the business and less of the transactional aspect. Obviously, he works for Velux, which is a partner of ours. So if you have any needs for Skylights or questions, we can put everyone in touch. Again, VeluxUSA.com. But just super cool to hear his story and how much he provided us, how much insight and backlog he gave us, or backstory to his upbringing, what introduced him to the trades, how he got started, his path into this industry. And it was a very indirect path that took him to where he is today. But at the end of the day, you look back and it all makes sense and it all worked out. So I appreciate him taking the time and really just sharing his story with us.
Well, I mean, on that note, if someone's listening to this and stuck in a job or just unsure of what their path might be, what would you want to say to them? I think that's something that you can take away from this episode, right? Thinking about, how can you support someone that, might be in that position? Did I lose you?
No, sorry, I was typing something.
You went dead quiet.
I was looking at the intro.
Oh,
and then when it got really quiet for a while, I was like, I feel like he wanted me to bounce back with something.
That's okay. Well, no, I think to wrap it up, there's a few things that I think came out of this podcast, that being one of them. But also, if you've seen the long game, you've taken risks, you've grieved losses, found new meaning, and a prompt that we would give you is to sit and think about what matters most to you now. And I think, we kind of touched on it with obviously the loss of Wayne's brother, which is terrible, but how that perspective can bring, new meaning to life and really allows you to focus on what matters the most. But yeah, thank you to Wayne for being open and honest and, and the why behind the work that really matters. So we appreciate you guys listening. As always, head over to moderncraftsman.co. Make sure you sign up for our newsletter. You're getting way more than just this episode and the inside look at each episode, but I share some more in-depth and transparent thoughts Monday morning. It's becoming my new favorite thing to do, and you guys have been amazing with some feedback. But if you want an inside look at that, you got to sign up for the newsletter. Yeah, we'll see you next week.
Trust my mama, you're no match for my bad karma.